and we are the Ad Hoc Committee on Homelessness. It's Wednesday, January the 30th, a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Our city attorney is here now, and so I thought for the purposes of convenience, why don't we take item 2 first so that we can have you speak on the record. And I'm really deeply appreciative of the fact that you've taken time out today to speak to our ongoing concerns about this matter that you and I have spent a lot of time working on together, and it's still an issue, and your office has been really wonderful in dealing with what we hope will be a change in behavior, a change in habit in the region, and a change in the way people are brought to Skid Row. You know, I think we all knew it's always been happening all along, but until Mrs. Reyes was actually caught on the video, did we really begin to see firsthand the callousness in which people have been brought into Central City East. You know, from my experiences and yours too, and some of your staff, we witnessed people being dumped on San Julian Street by regional, not LAPD, but other law enforcement agencies, taxis, wheelchairs, stretchers, with IVs, open wounds. It's just pretty shocking in a place that is just absolutely one of the most unstable areas in the city. So one of the challenges that I wanted to state for this record is I think that the hospitals need to think about working with us and being our friend in this and our ally rather than being opposed to us, figure out with us how to work this out. And I understand that the hospitals have challenges that they face, and that the hospitals hold nonprofit status, and that of course gives you a very special responsibility to the patients that I think we all serve. But I hope that both sides will be able to sit down, discuss the draft of the ordinance, the reasons that it came to fore in the first place, and see it as a means of helping hospitals understand the importance of what the city's trying to do here, and to stop a practice that has been devastating, not only in terms of public health, but in terms of devastating to those people who are dumped. And for people who are elderly and frail, confused patients who have clearly demonstrated that they need protection, like a conservator or a guardian, the discharge protocols make that provision for that type of evaluation, or in the very least, place these folks in the hands of competent, very caring, very attentive agencies that actually do have the capacity and the willingness to assist them. So I believe it's in the best interest of not only our city, but in the hospitals as well. And the revolving door of people bouncing in and out of hospital to homelessness to hospital to homelessness, I hope we can work together to see that it stops. So with that, I'd like to ask yes, Mr. Rosendahl.
Yeah, just a quick comment. One of the joys would be coming out of all of this is the hospital, with its protocol for discharge, has a social worker that interacts with the patient before the patient is released and actually connects them to an agency that they then will be taken to. I understand the hospital's problem of, what it needs to deal with, but to discharge somebody to the street or to discharge them right back where they took them from is no solution. But it can be done if the social worker or outtake person in a protocol has a list of agencies, makes a couple of phone calls, sees who will take that person, and then they connect it. Problem solved. We also, Mr. City Attorney, have a lot of other issues about the other cities and where they are, and if the hospital isn't in our city, but yet the discharge is in our city, which of course we need answers to. But I just want to thank you for being here personally for us as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. City Attorney, if you would, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you also for your leadership on this issue, as well as Councilmember Rosendahl for your support in our efforts to stop what is, as Councilmember Perry pointed out, a callous act and an unconscionable act. As you all know, this is an issue that I think all of us are very passionate about. I'm very passionate about it. And I don't think any of us today would not remember the story of Mr. Gambino Alvera, who is a paraplegic man and was dumped on Skid Row with most of his possessions in a bag clenched between his teeth. And though it may be hard to believe, next week is the one-year anniversary of when Mr. Olvera was dumped up front of Gladys Park in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. And I have to say that even though a year has passed, the images still are shocking and heart-wrenching. And even though they are still alive and well in our hearts and in our guts, there currently is no law that makes the dumping of a homeless patient, hospital patient, on Skid Row a specific crime. And so, as you know, we went to Sacramento with a bill which was very similar to the ordinance that you have before you today, or that we are proposing. That bill, SB 275, would have created a misdemeanor violation for any health facility that transported or caused the transport of any patient to a location other than their known dwelling without the patient's informed consent. At that time, we came before the City Council for a resolution in support of this straight misdemeanor provision, and Councilmember Perry, you were courageous enough to support that resolution, and Councilmember Garcetti actually seconded it, and a few days later, the resolution was before the full council and passed unanimously. Your support of SB 275, coupled with that of AFSCME, the California Alliance of Retired Americans, California Nurses Association, Central City East Association, Lambda Letters Project, Los Angeles Police Department, California Mental Health Association, and of course the Union Rescue Mission, allowed SB 275 to move through the legislature with bipartisan support. But as you all know, unfortunately, Governor Schwarzenegger sided against Los Angeles and with the special interests and vetoed the bill just a few months ago, which is why we're here today, asking you to stand with us in support of this ordinance. Yes?
Can I ask you one question on
Sure.
that?
Mhm.
And it wasn't just the governor, it was some of our own members from this area. I think when it went to committee, can you remember what happened there? Because I remember reading about it and I was pretty shocked.
There were members from the Los Angeles area who put in different provisions that would, in our estimation, made it more difficult for us to ever get to a prosecution and hold hospitals accountable. But in the end, leadership in both houses of the legislature took those provisions out again and then sent it to the governor as a straight misdemeanor.
Okay.
And then he vetoed it. I would like to just take a moment to go through some of the claims that the industry lobbyists have made about this ordinance, because we know them very well, having gone through the process in Sacramento. First, they will argue that there is no provision for situations in which the patient is mentally unable to give consent. The truth is that hospitals have to deal with these situations on a regular basis. We all know that. They can get a court-appointed conservator to act as a guardian for mentally impaired patients in 72 hours. Even in busy courthouses in Los Angeles, it takes 72 hours. And if what the industry lobbyists say is true, that homeless patients typically stay 4 days longer, then that's plenty of time to get somebody to make a decision on their behalf before they're discharged. Second, they will claim that the misdemeanor charge is unfair in situations in which there is no availability of shelter or recuperative care beds. The industry lobbyists use this argument to claim that we are singling out the hospitals for the problem of homelessness. Hospitals are not treating homeless patients out of charity. They are not treating them out of charity. It's not, even though they're nonprofits, that's not what they're doing. They are required to do so by federal law, and we as a nation have decided that that's the case, and they should do it. So it's something they factor into their business model. And it's something that a hospital must do if it is to receive Medicare reimbursement. If a patient presents him or herself to an emergency room, that patient must be seen by a doctor and that patient must be stabilized. That's the law. If the patient is admitted to the hospital, existing law already requires that the hospital make appropriate arrangements for post-hospital care for any patient who may suffer adverse health consequences upon discharge. Now, we have never said this legislation will solve homelessness. If we could do that, that would be great, but it doesn't. It is not intended to solve the problem of homeless of the homeless problem here in Los Angeles. What we are trying to do is stop a very serious public health and public safety problem, a very serious problem that is threatening people's lives here in Los Angeles. Third, the industry lobbyists will likely argue that this measure will result in the closure of local hospitals. First off, as to the county hospitals, County USC has been fully supportive of our dumping investigations. In fact, they took Ann Reyes for 45 days after she was dumped from Kaiser, and they have taken countless other patients that have come from other hospitals. Furthermore, the county, understanding the severity of the problem, has instituted protocols for discharge and begun a pilot program to provide Section 8 vouchers to homeless patients when leaving county hospitals. We are not in the practice of putting hospitals out of business. We are not even asking them to change the way they treat homeless patients in any way, shape, or form. I want to be perfectly clear on this. This ordinance does not create a legal requirement for any hospital to transport any patient anywhere after discharge. It doesn't require that. All we are asking, and all this ordinance requires, is that if a hospital chooses to transport a patient, then that hospital must get that patient's consent, informed consent, before taking them to Skid Row. Now, is this a tough measure? Yes. I agree it is. Is this a necessary measure? Absolutely. We have been at the negotiating table with various hospitals now for almost 2 years, encouraging the establishment of reasonable and comprehensive uniform discharge protocols and best practices, just like Councilmember Rosendahl pointed out. Just like that. Not any more difficult than that. We've worked with local homeless service providers to clarify and codify the appropriate transfer process to assist hospitals in the discharge of their patients. We filed both civil and criminal actions against Kaiser, one of the largest healthcare providers in the country, and we filed multiple civil charges against both Hollywood Presbyterian and Methodist Hospital of Arcadia. And yet, even though we've done all of that, and by the way, we also sent a letter to all the hospitals in the area saying, don't do this, they continue to dump their patients and continue to think the world is not watching. Just this month, our office opened an investigation into the callous Skid Row dumping of a blind homeless patient. Now, what would have happened, or what would have become of this patient if somebody had not reached out to help? What would have become of Ann Reyes had that elderly woman suffering from dementia 16 miles away from her home in a place she'd never been to before, having been dumped by Kaiser, had she not been brought in from the street by the caring employee of a Union Rescue Mission? What would have happened to Gambino Malvera had not the other homeless individuals who were at Gladys Park made a phone call to LAPD because they are aware of this issue, and that LAPD and actually one of my prosecutors was on the scene within 15 minutes. These are not difficult questions, actually. We know the answers. We know what happens when homeless patients are left in the gutter or dropped in an alley with no one to care for them. We know because we saw what happened to Marina Brandt. On May 1st, 2005, after being released from a hospital and taken by taxi to Skid Row, Marina Brandt died of pneumonia. The coroner performing the autopsy said there was so much infection in her right lung that it weighed almost 3 times as much as her left lung. Later, the director of the emergency room where Marina Brandt had been a few days earlier stated that, from his standpoint, the care was appropriate. She was, on discharge, better than when she came in. By passing this ordinance as it is drafted on to the full council, you will send a clear and powerful message to the hospital industry that we as a city, as a state, as a society, will not tolerate such inhumane treatment of our most vulnerable members. I'm asking you today to give our prosecutors the tools to end this unconscionable practice, because it has not ended, and we want it to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney. I can agree with you. The last Skid Row walk that I was on in front of the Midnight Mission with the fellow who started the 3-on-3 basketball. We were standing there waiting to take off to walk, and taxi swooped in dumped somebody right in front of us. And there were actually police cars there, and I asked him where he came from, and the man had been stabbed and had a line coming out of his abdomen, and it was within the last 2 months. It was
Right.
pretty amazing. And he did give me the name of the hospital, and we did follow up on it, but
Right.
it's pretty shocking.
And it continues.
Yeah, that it does continue, in
Is-
spite of everything.
Right.
Well, I really appreciate your taking your time and recognize that, and Mr. Garcetti is here now. Before you go,
yeah.
if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to allow
Sure.
my colleagues and myself
Yeah.
to ask you
Sure,
a few questions, that
absolutely.
would really be appreciated. Go ahead, Mr.
Just a few
Rosenthal.
questions.
Sure.
The city of Los Angeles is adjacent to many smaller cities throughout Los Angeles County. Since this ordinance is in the city of Los Angeles, will this ordinance only apply to hospitals within the city of Los Angeles?
No, we believe that if the action takes place in the city of Los Angeles, it will apply to them. So Ann Reyes, 16 miles away at Kaiser Bellflower, dumped in Skid Row. She actually never lived in the city of Los Angeles. That incident would be covered by this ordinance.
Next question. Based on the current draft of the city ordinance, would it be legal for a hospital to drop off a homeless person on the street if that is where the patient was picked up from first?
Only if they gave their consent to be taken back there. Only if the patient gave their consent, informed consent, to go back to that place.
Is there anything that we can do to ensure that homeless patients are transported to a location more suitable for human habitation?
Well, again, we can encourage, and that's what we're doing with all of these cases, encourage those hospitals to adopt the Kaiser protocols, which Kaiser has adopted, by the way. And those protocols do allow for that to occur.
And then that protocols, what has the city done, you just answered it, to ensure that there are comprehensive discharge procedures targeted toward vulnerable patients such as those that are homeless?
Again, we have said to all the hospitals in Los Angeles, adopt the Kaiser protocols. Hollywood Presbyterian has made a representation to us and in the media that they have adopted them. We don't know that to be true. One of the things we did do with Kaiser in our settlement with them is we have a court-appointed monitor, if you will, that will make sure that those protocols are adhered to, and it's former federal judge here, Lourdes Baird, who is doing that for us, and we think that's an appropriate way to go.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Garcetti, did you want to ask a few questions?
Sure. Just, I have stuff for the Hospital Association, but I want to be conscious of your time as well. When you were looking at this, I understand the misdemeanor piece is, obviously a big deal for funding. Have you thought about kind of utilizing some sort of three-strike system, on misdemeanor or something that would lead up to misdemeanor?
We went through that entire process during the Sacramento, and actually Councilmember Perry asked about that before you came, where local legislators here put in basically that sort of process where it would be 3 strikes or 2 strikes or bigger fines and things like that. And what we learned in that process is that was a way simply to delay. These hospitals know what they're required to do by law. They've had to do it for many, many years. We're saying just adhere to that and don't take a patient someplace else without their informed consent. We think this is the right way to deal with it. It has worked with respect to Kaiser, and we think it would be, we wouldn't be supportive. In fact, when that language was put in Sacramento to go something like a 3-strike system, we, at that point, were prepared to withdraw our support and then oppose the bill. Because we think this draws a very bright and clear line, and that's what we need, because as was pointed out before you walked in, homeless patient dumping continues. Just this month, a blind homeless patient was dumped on Skid Row, and we're currently investigating that. So even with all the exposure, national media exposure of dumping on Skid Row, and the fact that I sent out letters to every hospital in the region saying, don't do this, it continues. So we think this is the right step to take, and we're prepared to move forward with this.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry I missed that before, and thanks for the great work you've been doing on this.
Sure.
You're all good? You okay?
Just if you had questions.
Oh, we're finished with that.
Okay.
Thank you
We have
both
a
very
number.
much.
Thank you, and
Yeah.
if your staff could read
Yes.
staff attorney,
Yeah.
that'd be really great. Thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah.
I'm going to call 3 speakers at a time. Veronica Perez Becker, followed by Carol Meyer, followed by Mark Gable. To the front. And Madam Clerk, if you could run the clock. Yeah, 2.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Veronica Perez Becker from the Central City Association. We thank the committee for working to improve the city's homelessness crisis, and we agree that hospitals should be held accountable for proper patient discharge. But we have concerns about this motion that we hope you keep in mind as you move forward. First, criminally charging hospitals does not get to the root of the problem, which is that many discharged patients have nowhere to go. Second, criminal charges threaten a hospital's eligibility for Medicare and Medi-Cal funding, which could cause even more hospitals in our bed-starved region to close. This outcome not only penalizes the hospital, but it unfairly penalizes the community. Indeed, 10 hospital emergency rooms serving LA County have closed in the last 5 years. The remaining emergency rooms must often turn away patients due to overcrowded conditions. We must remember that these hospitals are the medical safety net for the county's 3 million uninsured residents, providing almost $2 billion of unpaid medical care annually. This is not to say that hospitals should not be held accountable. They absolutely should. But instead of criminalizing a vital partner in our efforts to fight homelessness and threatening their ability to operate, we should be working with them to come up with comprehensive, workable solutions to this multidimensional and complex problem. We thank Councilmember Perry for her willingness to take a deeper look into this issue and hope that you will keep these concerns in mind as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Meyer, followed by Mark Gamble, followed by Carrie Gatlin.
Mark and I are sort of here together for the hospitals, and so I'd like him to go first, and then I'll talk on behalf of the county.
And council member, the city attorney gave us a lot to respond to, so I don't know if I can ask for permission to
Name for
extend
the
that.
record?
Why don't you
Mark Gamble with the
take
Hospital
your 2 minutes,
Association.
and then she'll take her 2 minutes.
Okay, Mark Gamble with the Hospital
This is gonna be
Association.
the last time we talk about this.
About to do my best FedEx impersonation from that commercial where he talked very quickly, so I apologize. First of all, the ordinance as proposed in SB 27, and the language in 275, the reason we opposed it, the misdemeanor language, according to the Office of Inspector General at the federal level, any hospital or provider convicted of a misdemeanor will lose Medicaid and Medicare funding for 5 years. That's why strike one is very significant. That is why this ordinance is very significant, because we have had 10 hospitals close, and there isn't a hospital in this county that could withstand the loss of Medicaid or Medicare. There are other ways to have authority over the hospitals. What didn't exist last year, which does now, is SB 1312. Department of Health Services or Public Health now, who has oversight of the hospitals, had no way to levy fines against hospitals for no matter what they did to a patient. Last year, SB 1312 went into effect. The Department of Public Health licensing can now fine a hospital $25,000 whenever they are found to have put a patient in immediate jeopardy. I would contend that any hospital that sends a homeless patient to Skid Row without their knowledge or consent or without being in appropriate physical health would be subsequent to that fine of $25,000. That's the minimum fine. The fine is about to go up to $50,000, so there's plenty of leverage there. What hospitals have been done, providing 18,000 patients who don't have any health care anywhere else in this county, medical treatment. They are the medical safety net. Talk about the hospital's not-for-profit status and what they're required to do. They are treating patients at a cost of $40 million a year. This is homeless patients in the downtown area. This is a limited number of hospitals. So, again, what we've done, we've also gone out, since the last time I was before this committee, and we've done homeless discharge training, which Kaiser helped pay for. We've set up recuperative care beds,
Need to watch
30
time up.
beds. Okay, the last point is to something that was said earlier in terms of the discharge planner picking up the call, making a few phone calls. For 72,000 homeless patients, there are 15,000 shelter beds. Hospitals are becoming the
We'll talk
shelters.
about that next.
Okay,
The
please,
the green is the county, okay?
let's
The
not,
little triangles are the city, but the green is the county, so we'll talk about that next. You're next.
Carol Meyer, Director of Governmental Affairs for the County of Los Angeles. 75% of the homeless patients end up at LACU, USC Medical Center, or our other county hospitals. So we are very familiar with dealing with the homeless population. We do have very extensive discharge policies in the county, very similar and probably exceed the Kaiser protocol. At LACUSC Medical Center, at least 50 patients a day out of our 700 patients are in there that could leave the hospital and cannot because they are homeless and there is no place for them to go. This costs the County of Los Angeles an incredible amount of money. These are unpaid days that we are unable to secure funding for. The county is not in support of dumping, obviously. As a nurse in the ER at a county hospital for many years, I know what it's like to take care of these people, and I care very much about these people. We are concerned, and the Board of Supervisors opposed SB 275 because of the misdemeanor that it would place on hospitals and the resultant closure of hospitals. We would also like to talk to you about furthering our work together on the homeless. The county has already put many dollars into recuperative beds, many dollars into work that is going on like Project 50 to identify the 50 most vulnerable people in the Skid Row area. So I reiterate, Councilman, that it is not just a couple of calls to find a location to put these people from a hospital. We keep patients on an average of 4 days in LA County hospitals. The homeless are kept an average of 9 days or more. It's not just simple calls. There's no place for them to go.
Thank you. Carrie Gatlin. Followed by Brenda Wilson.
Hi, good afternoon. Carrie Gatlin representing the Union Rescue Mission. And we have been huge supporters of SB 275 and this local ordinance in order to stop this horrific practice. It's getting unbearable for service providers to see on a regular basis. I can't even begin to tell you the stories, the many people that we see that are dumped with feces on them. They can't take care of themselves. They can't shower themselves. They can't go to the bathroom themselves. I have personally worked with our staff to call local area hospitals that we have partnerships with and begged their medical director, please don't leave this guy here. Please come assess this situation. Please do something about this. You know that this is going to turn into a prosecution with the city attorney. Please don't leave this person here. And been told by emergency medical directors myself that if you think that this person cannot take care of themselves, then you need to call 911. And this patient was dropped off and discharged by one of their social workers that called our facility, was told after going through a protocol of assessment, and said, it doesn't sound like we can take this patient. He's not ambulatory. He can't take care of himself. A 200-bed shelter dormitory is not a good place for him. And the patients are sent anyway, and this happens on a daily basis, and it still happens with County USC, and they have a homeless coordinator that will never return my phone calls, and it happens with all of our area hospitals. No matter how much training has been done, there's got to be a stick, because this keeps occurring, and these are extremely vulnerable people. I just wish you could know them personally the way we do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilson.
I'll make mine very brief. I certainly agree with Carrie, because New Image has been dumped on quite a bit in this last year, as late as Monday of this week, and been calling Attorney Gordon Turner, the City Attorney Gordon Turner, to help us in these cases. And I think it's a very, very serious problem. And I do know, however, I'm sure the hospitals are keeping them much longer, but there needs to be more communication with the discharge planners and the shelter locations, where the discharge planner calls ahead of time, not just sends them by taxi. And I know this year alone we've had about 22, 23, and it's just got to stop. What I do is I call the hospital administrators, and I talked to the hospital administrators and the director of nursing, and to try to prevent this from occurring. New Image is part of the Los Angeles Central Providers Collaborative, which is downtown shelters that meet on a monthly basis to discuss issues like this, and we are in the process of creating a forum that I think will be instrumental in decreasing the number of times that this occurs throughout L.A.
Thank you very much. Estela Lopez?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good afternoon. I'm the director of the Central City East Association. We operate 3 business improvement districts in the area. By the tens of thousands, we respond to calls for service from our stakeholders in the area. Thousands of those calls are for what we call health and welfare checks, individuals who are on the street and incapable of caring for themselves. We have, over the 10 or so years that we have been doing this type of work, encountered some incredible, inhumane acts out on the street of people that we find still in hospital gowns, still wearing their hospital tags. I think, with all due respect, and the service providers here are doing an incredible job. We're often the ones who come across these individuals. We find them, we transport them, or we get someone to transport them to places where they can get help. We need the carrot and the stick, obviously. If some hospitals are responding now and doing the right thing, they should be applauded. But the smaller institutions, we're afraid, are still going to try to do things under the cover of darkness when they feel that no one's watching. In fact, we put 10 cameras up on Skid Row, and those cameras have very often caught these dumpings as they have taken place. So we cannot let up. The pressure must stay on. The vigilance must stay on. We shouldn't allow our brothers and sisters to be left on the sidewalk. And if you can be the policy makers, the initiators, that prevent us from having to find these bodies on the street, we beg of you, please, to do that, to help to do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no additional cards on this item. The action we can take today is to adopt the motion before the committee. Do I have a motion for that? And Mr. Rosendahl, would you like to second that?
So
Great.
moved.
And then, in the context of that, I've asked the city attorney to please sit down with the Hospital Association one more time, and that we'll bring the ordinance back in 30 days to committee. And that'll be the order for this item.
And I'd just like to ask the city attorney a question.
Sure. Good morning. Steve Gold, Deputy City Attorney.
Just real quick,
Yes.
on the misdemeanor charge and losing your Medicare or Medicaid status. Explain that to us.
I actually, Mike, do you know that?
It's something that was mentioned in the hearings that they held up in Sacramento. There is a federal code that says that if a hospital is convicted of a misdemeanor, that they are supposed to be or shall be prohibited from receiving Medicare reimbursements for 5 years. I've spent a long time searching medical records, Lexis searches, things like that, newspaper articles, and I haven't been able to find a single hospital that has had that punishment levied upon it. We've found a lot of instances where the federal department has worked with the hospitals, issued fines, given them protocols to follow, but we've never, even when upon having actions that should be taken against them with a mandatory expulsion from Medicare, but we haven't actually seen an example of that yet, and we don't think that that's a real argument. Yeah.
Other questions? Mr. Garcetti.
I just wanted to say one word to the Hospital Association. I know we're turning the county in a second as well, and I know that you've been working with the county to cite the recuperative beds, but the process is taking a long time, and I think that's a central part of this, and I'd really like to see how we can jumpstart this process, whether we can turn this into a partnership with the city potentially. County funds will be necessary there, but I think the city is able to pretty nimbly act on this, and if that's part of the issue, again, I know we'll be talking about this more in the next item we discuss, but county-city partnership has to be improved, and I respect if the county, for their internal reasons, isn't able to do it as quickly, but I do believe that we can act more quickly and fulfill what the county needs and help the Hospital Association as well.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you in 30 days.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go back to item 1. Do we have any cards on it? Okay, why don't we give us on the record the description of item 1?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions.
Item number 1 is Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority to report relative to the cold, wet weather winter shelter program, utilization, and locations to date.
Okay. LASA's here today to report on the cold, wet weather emergency shelter program, and will talk to us about utilization and site locations. And then for my colleagues on committee, we do have some maps that were prepared by my office. You can see, without my editorial comments, the symbols for where the cold, wet weather shelters are and the year-round shelters within the context of the city and the county of Los Angeles. So with that, Lassa, would you proceed?
Sure. Good afternoon, council members. So today I've prepared for you, I'm sorry, my name is David Martell. I'm a contracts unit manager for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Today I've prepared several reports for you. The first 2 are regarding occupancy rates in the winter shelter program this season. We collect weekly updates every Monday from our shelter providers of their occupancy for the past week. So what you see before you is current through this last Sunday, January 27th. We have a chart that talks about each half of each month, the December and January, and then for the total season. We have listed the contractors and their locations by those that are funded with City of LA funds, and those that have seen the highest occupancy in the season so far in descending order. And then the subsequent, the next page is actually a chart, which may be a little bit easier to analyze the statistics than looking at the actual spreadsheet. But what you'll see is the general trend for each shelter is a steady increase in occupancy every 2 weeks, which is fairly consistent with previous years. There's usually a period in December where the notice gets out, word of mouth spreads, and people start coming to the shelters. Certainly, the weather conditions in early January and then over this last week have caused some of the numbers to spike in the various shelters. But again, and what you'll see is that the percentages, the occupancy rates, are based on individual shelters and their capacities. So some shelters have a very large capacity, and like the 236-bed shelters and the 193-bed shelters, and I think even though it shows 86% over the season, you'll see that they were 96% over the last 2 weeks. So again, the general trend has been a steady increase over the last, over each of these 2-week periods. And I don't have it here, but I know from last year's, the occupancy rates are fairly comparable at this point in time to what they were last year. That's basically the extent of my report. I don't know if anybody has any questions about a specific shelter. Okay. So those are the first 2 reports. The next several reports, there was some discussions going on when we were working to get the programs on the west side, Culver City and West LA, up and running, about where the transportation sites would be located, and who actually uses the shelters. And the agency that is running that, which is Imago, also runs the program in Burbank, and has agreed to collect information about the community of origin. These programs are all bus in, bus out, and what tends to the communities that are being served tend to ask, how many folks are coming from our community, how many are coming from your community. And what you can see here is of the unduplicated folks that were served in December, how many became homeless in each specific community. So I'm looking at the West LA report. And again, it's sorted in descending order, so you can see that of the folks that get picked up and taken to the West LA Armory, about 28% became homeless in Los Angeles, 17% became homeless in Santa Monica, about 5% in West LA, and 5% in Hollywood. And then, if you turn to the next report, my order is Culver City. And for Culver City, the folks that, the unduplicated count in December, those that became homeless, 30% became homeless in Venice, 26% in Santa Monica, and 13% in other areas of Los Angeles. We know Venice is part of Los Angeles as well. And that's the large makeup of the group. And for those wanting to, there's also another report on Burbank that Imago put together. And, one thing to note is that this program has historically been in Glendale, and there was an issue with that armory not being available it's under a renovation this season. So we had to turn to the Burbank Armory and the community of Burbank, which actually embraced this program fairly strongly. When we brought it to them, we were very pleased with that. But you can see there's a pickup in Glendale, there's a pickup in Burbank, and you can see where folks became homeless. 34% were in Glendale, 13% in Los Angeles, and 13% in Burbank.
All right, next.
So those were the extent of the reports that I brought regarding the winter shelter program and the occupancy that we've seen this season. One thing to note, and I think the first 2 weeks in January, I think, were heavily impacted because of some of the weather during that time. But one trend that you'll also tend to see is, again, the second half of the month always has a higher occupancy rate than the first half of the month. Many folks that do use these programs have public benefits and tend to exhaust them in the first half of the month. They exhaust them in the first half of the month and then rely more heavily on the shelters in the second half of the month.
Okay, next. Anybody else?
We're here to answer questions or discuss anything else that
Mr.
comes up.
Rosendahl, you have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And if I could ask Carrie to come on up, too, at the same time. For everybody's information, last week I toured the two shelters that we've played a role in reopening. As you all know, $30,000 came from the city of Los Angeles, $20,000 from Zev Yaroslavsky and the county Most Grateful, and $10,000 is coming from the Coalition on Hunger. Homelessness on the west side. That $60,000 is the base drop that Carrie has had to work with. Carrie, I want to give you this first off the top. This came from Laura and our staff for games for people to play.
We will love that.
I felt a little at a loss. There was no dominoes for me to play. There was nothing to do when I went to the shelters.
There was no dominoes?
There was nothing. When I go to the great one.
Packed cards.
We have some now.
Okay, when I was at the downtown shelters, those great folks over there, boy, it felt a little bit like home in some of the spots, and a little more homeliness would be nice. I just want to go through a bunch of questions, and Carrie, if you could help too, if you have a difficulty with it.
Carrie, can you help?
I can help.
Okay.
Can you give us a general idea of how many homeless people on the west side have been served by this program, for the record?
Roughly about 450 at West LA and about 420 unduplicated numbers. So what you're seeing here on the reports are the nightly shelter counts. But we roughly estimate that maybe 870, is that what I said, 450? Yeah, about 870 people.
I understand that there were funding shortfalls. Will Imbago be able to operate the program through March 15th?
In Culver City, yes. In West LA, We have a problem with the Armory shutting down the 1st through the 15th of the month, so we had to find an alternate site. So we're actually working with LASA to negotiate the contract for where that alternate site would be, because the original Veterans Administration building is not going to work for us because of upgrades and accessibility and some ADA problems and things like that. So we're working to identify an alternate site for the Culver City population. So the long answer to that question is yes, we will be able to serve those people through the 15th, but we might only contract to keep the Culver City program 100% fully operational till the 15th.
And LASA's aware of that and finding a spot.
Yes, because one of the problems is it's really the availability of the location and not the contract itself. The VA, as Carrie said, would have required extensive renovations and all kinds of other things that would be sort of a long-term process.
But I'll give you a perfect example of how we handled that on a blackout weekend that we had in January.
Right.
In early January, it wasn't was it Culver City wasn't available for a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. So we had those 130 or so people that we were serving there. And what we did was we maxed out the other shelter location, put extra cots, and then we also accommodated some of them at our downtown facility in our gym and our winter shelter, because we have winter shelter staff downtown as well. So our staff doubled up, worked with them down there, and got them back on the bus to the West Side drop-off in the morning. And it actually worked very smoothly. And so we might have to, because we have some other blackout dates coming up and no alternate sites. So we have accommodated people, and we'll continue to make sure that everybody's taken care of.
And we appreciate that. As I mentioned in my opening, of the 60 grand and where it came from, 20 from the county, 10 is in the process, and 30 came from the city. My question is what can we do about getting, statistically speaking, the folks that have entered those two facilities, have they come from just LA City, or where else have they come from, and what numbers have we found that to be? I know I see the reports here.
Well, it's David reported on the community of origin is what we ask them. And just so you know how we come to that, oftentimes when somebody's homeless, and you say, what is your community of origin? They'll say, well, I'm homeless. And so we go through a whole series of questions in order to try to get to that, to find out where was the last place that you were actually residing before you ended up homeless. So that's how we come to that community of origin. Now, just because somebody says, well, my community of origin is Illinois, they might have been living here on the streets of Santa Monica for the last 3 years. And so it's really like the Burbank. I was telling David Martell, at the Burbank site, we only report that 13% of the people are coming from Burbank, but we're seeing 18% of the people get off the bus in Burbank, get off the Burbank bus.
Right.
So those, that other 6% are calling somewhere else their home community, even though they're residing in Burbank.
Yeah, my question is more directed to the two shelters there, where I'm told anecdotally, and your stats, Lassa, suggest a good number came from the city of Santa Monica.
Yes.
And why isn't Santa Monica participating in helping us fund this?
I can't really answer that. We'd have to talk to Santa Monica. I mean, I think at this point they said they just weren't willing to put money into the.
Can you find out and report back to us? For me, it's, we praise Santa Monica all the time for being on the forefront of dealing with homelessness from a small city's perspective. But this is a critical winter program. We've had horrible, rainy, cold realities in the sense of a homeless person. I think it's great we have all that rain, but not if I was homeless. And these folks, if in fact the percentages are accurate, what percent are coming from the city of Santa Monica? Did your
32%.
32%. I'd like to have a reason from the city why they're not assisting us in this crisis situation, which is a winter shelter program that if they're so great, which I always felt they were, why aren't they supporting this winter program and helping us through this difficult time?
We'll definitely do that, Councilmember Rosendahl. And I also wanted to say, one of the things we wanted to come back to you, at the end of the
By the
season.
way, Culver City as well, and
Yes, absolutely.
adjacent areas.
Well, and one of the other things we had said we were going to come back to you at the end of the season was looking at, we have this incredibly complex blending of funds to try to pull this program together, which is why I think because it's such an underfunded program, it's harder and harder each year to find contractors who are willing to come forward for the amount of money that we have to offer in an RFP, which is why for these 3 locations, we didn't have an operator this year. And Imago stepped forward, but was unwilling or unable, clearly, to do it for the money that was available. So one of the things we said we would come forward to talk about at a future date is, the overall, what it would take to really fund this properly, wherever those funds came from. And I think one of the presentations we want to make is just to show you how both underfunded but also creatively funded this program is and how complicated it is to put together. And now, in addition, with your help, getting these little pieces of funding from these various places, we've kind of patched together this program, but it's really, really very tough.
Councilman Rosendahl, may I respond, please, to the issue of Culver City and Santa Monica? Because the loss of Rebecca probably has to be politically correct, but I don't, because I don't work for the city or the county, so I'm just going to be truthful with you about
I'm sure
that.
she's truthful, but
What do you mean by that? Go ahead.
No. You know what I mean by that. I'm gonna speak very frankly about that subject, like I always do. Culver City, first of all, feels like they've done their part because they're actually they own the armory, which is kind of a unique situation, and they let us use it. And frankly, none of the people that we're seeing are Culver City residents. They are all bussed into Culver City. So Culver City really is doing their part to take in a community that comes from West LA and Santa Monica and Beverly Hills and everywhere else, and they take them and they've been supportive. Right. So I support Culver City in that and think that they are doing the right thing. However, the city of Santa Monica, and this is going to take some political will that maybe this committee could bring upon them. They basically told us that they would not support this program with any money, and because they do not believe that any of the residents are truly certified Santa Monica residents. They have a certification process where they have identified about 600 people in their continuum of care that are Santa Monica residents, and if they don't have an ID that shows they're a Santa Monica resident, they will not support them.
That's amazing.
No, and I have sent a very long description of their policy to their mayor and to their council people, and basically they all support that stand. And it's shameful.
Your latest correspondence.
I'd be happy to.
Together a motion and.
It's shameful.
Yeah, well, when we see the stats from the homeless count, that over 2,000 come from Santa Monica and over 2,000 come from my areas around it.
No, they only have 600 certified.
Yeah, I understand what they've told you. But the reality is that I'd like to understand from Santa Monica, now that we've made these charges very clear, what their issue is with doing it. But I'm looking for Lass's Monday morning quarterbacking final report, analysis of what we need to do, best practices for next year. There's a lot of money in the county sitting in silos.
We won't be waiting that long, don't worry.
Yeah. We want to get that money out and get it into the street and get things going. This is an emergency situation. Winter shelter means an emergency situation and an emergency concept. We like the 50 homeless bit that the county is doing and even the Santa Monica concept of concentration, but that does not go anywhere near dealing with the issues we need to do.
So where are you going to get your money for that fire station where you want to put beds?
Yeah, the fire station that I want to put beds, which is going to be 24 units with the first one, if the mayor doesn't take the property away from me, sell it on the open market and let a developer come in and build high-end condos, which of course I'll be clear with his honor that those properties are properties that are vital.
Where are you getting the money from? Do you know yet?
The money?
Yeah, to fund the beds.
No.
Okay, have you started talking?
We're trying to see if we got the land first, so we can do the partnership with the private sector. We have to get
Santa Monica,
that
yeah.
declared surplus, so that we have access to it to take these plans to the next step.
Before we, Brenda Wilson wants to speak, and Brenda, why don't you make your way up here? The three of us will be putting together a motion which will answer these questions on the record. Tell us specifically what LA County has done in the last 12 months to add more beds in the region, based on the map I have, which is pretty lonely up there on the top. It doesn't look like we got a lot going on there. One of the ongoing concerns we have is far too much difficulty in establishing programs, and you were being very gracious, Mr. President, when you said that they'd been working to establish recuperative beds, which is probably why you're the president and I'm not. The fact that we have the number of beds that we have in this area makes us the epicenter for homeless services, but certainly not the solution. And definitely not the regional solution, but just an entry point. And I think that's the point of the shelters. So the motion that we will be working on, the three of us, will ask LASA to examine in greater detail with its commission, and we'll certainly give you a draft when we're done. The obligation of the county and its strengthening its partnership with us. I know that Burbank and, you know, the chart references that in Long Beach have opened their shelters and have done really the very best they can, but in my estimation, the map kind of says it all. So, before we close, Ms. Wilson is back.
What a great lady.
You're
What a
too
great
kind.
program you have.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say I don't know what we do without LASA. We appreciate you and everything you do and your support of our agency and other agencies, and because this is a very difficult job that we have. But I would just like to take a minute and say, you know, if you, in listening to everything that's been said already, you heard all the struggles of operating a winter shelter program. Certainly, you know, New Image has done it since 1989, so we know city, county, and then when LASA came to be, the struggles with trying to find a site, neighborhood opposition, funding problems, trying to find funders, trying to find providers that even want to do it now, to do the struggle and the fight. So I would like to ask this committee if they would please just try to think about doing year-round only. It would be a lot easier, number one. It would be a lot, and the funding is, I know, the funding is the issue, but I just wanted to go on record that I think a year-round program, to eliminate the winter shelters and just to go year-round, I think would be the answer to decreasing homelessness in the
Carrie,
city.
let me ask you one quick
And in the
question.
county.
I sent out a blast to all my constituents to make contributions, to volunteer.
And we're getting a lot of response. Thank you.
And I've been speaking before my groups and also telling, you've been getting a lot of responses?
We have, and thank you for bringing that up because I forgot to. I thank you for that and the game because we have been receiving a lot of volunteer support. A lot of people, we keep saying, bring socks, bring underwear, dry stuff, umbrellas. And as you know, we stayed open. I don't know if you all know this, but the county actually worked with the State Office of Emergency Services to declare a crisis last weekend so that we could keep the armories open all weekend through Monday to make sure we got people out of the rain. So I made sure that we got some dominoes and some cards over there. And 2/3 of our population actually took advantage of staying in, even though Saturday we thought it was going to pour down rain. It turned out to be a gorgeous day. People just stayed in and slept and rested, and it was really wonderful to see. And so, and a lot of your volunteers came over, and
I wanted to thank Carrie for that as well, because Carrie came to us and was very creative, because we were so concerned. It had been such terrible rain. It was so cold. And said, let's get this declared an emergency by the state. And we're like, an emergency by the state? Okay. And within,
you did it, David did it within
a few
like
hours.
4 hours.
It was Friday afternoon, and we did that Friday afternoon for the weekend. And we just hoped that nobody would be mad that we were keeping those open 24 hours.
Might I also say,
I
just from
called
a
everybody and let them know.
perspective as a social worker, I talked individually with about 40 homeless people. okay? And many of them, if I could have only have connected them up with a social welfare person who could then take them to the next level, it would have been great. Colleagues, I got Channel 35 to come and cover it, and we made a money pitch right into the camera, money, volunteers, clothing, food, that kind of thing. They're making a program that will be on Channel 35 that will generate more energy besides the email blast. People want to help, they just need the connecting points, and we need to give it to them.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I got a $500 check delivered to me today, which, as you know, in the beginning, we had in order to stretch to the 15th of March, we have a $91,000 shortfall. I don't think people realize how much it costs to feed people and buy toilet paper and all of that. And you helped to fill 60,000 of that 90. So we still have a $30,000 gap. So $500 check. I was very excited today, and that was a direct result of your support. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you very much. This is the time for public comment. We have 3 cards: Oscar Johnson, Brenda Wilson, and Linda Moran.
Howard, you can do the Pisano thing.
Linda and Brenda.
Good day. My name is Oscar Johnson. I was something like an proactive, and I was speaking on the part of the homeless and in the city of Los Angeles, and I see where our officials get so much revenues and so much of money, and they don't put too much positive toward the homeless way. It seems as though we should form something like an ethics committee, or else we should build more prison and put homeless in prison. There would be a better way of dignity than them stay on the street like animals. I think living in prison, it would be better because they're, bringing down our community when they're, living on our streets and they going in our trash cans around our homes. And too much been did about it, though. And it seems as though we should be more accountable for, for the funds that we're receiving for the homeless, though. And it seems like our mayor of Los Angeles have neglected his responsibility. He have let Los Angeles went down. Let Los Angeles very dirty, the next city, the air, the streets need cleaning, the sidewalk need cleaning, the street need repaired, and the buses on the MTA need to be off. A lot of them are running malfunction, and the mayor's doing a very poor job in the city of Los Angeles. It seems as though we have no connection with our people that are supposed to represent us. It seems as though some type of committee should draw up some like federal indictments and try to do something against the people that really trying to support us are supposed to be governing us, and seem like they're neglecting their duty towards us in the city of Los Angeles. And I was involved with some liquor stores, with the coalition liquor stores. We have closed down 3 liquor stores, and would like to close down the liquor stores downtown Los Angeles that involving the homeless people, because all day long you see the majority of the homeless people is on alcohol and drugs, though. And don't do nothing but self-destruct. It seems as though a lot of us don't have too much responsibility in society. We don't have too much responsibility, too much to do every day. And like one comment said, a lot of homeless people from out of state, though.
Thank you very much, sir.
Brought here.
All right, Brenda Wilson, Linda Moran.
Okay. Good afternoon. I guess since she's here, I have to really identify. My name is Brenda Wilson, the good one and all that. But
thank you. He's here.
I'm here today to talk about the funding for the year-round shelter program. I know that the city has many critical decisions to make in this next year. But New Image is a resource center that happens to come with a nice place to sleep and 2 nutritious meals for our clients. But what I'm not telling you is that, or what I'm trying to tell you is that it's not a shelter. We don't look at it as a shelter. We look at it as a place where we can stabilize the homeless clients that enter New Image. We provide free medical now, Monday and Thursday. We're partnering with the LA County Department of Mental Health, who comes in 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to address the needs of our 40% mentally challenged clients. We are now in the process of doing some partnering with LA Trade Tech in the next couple of months, where they're going to be offering 40 programs for us to select for our homeless clients in the shelter, where we can provide them with the skills necessary for them to obtain jobs, to obtain, more than jobs, but the skills necessary to be gainfully employed so that we can have greater successes in what we do. Now, I'm happy to say that with the winter shelter programs open, the last, I'd say 2 weeks, if you avoid the rain, our census has decreased a little bit to where we are no longer turning away over 100 a night.
Yes.
Yes. However, when the winter shelter ends, our crisis will begin again. We are down, as of the September the 1st, as Lassa would tell you, down 85 shelter beds. And although we're down 85 shelter beds.
Separate and distinct individuals.
Yes.
I'll now end your time and allow her to speak.
Okay, I can always concede my time, right?
What's your name?
My name is Linda Moran, and I'm Deputy Director of New Image Emergency Shelter. And let me see, I can't just say ditto, right? Oh, no. Okay, we're being recorded here, okay? Well, for the benefit of anyone that's here that may not be familiar with the shelter site, just some quick facts I've been asked to state. New Images, as Brenda indicated, we are serving right around 600 now. When it rained, we got up to like 648. So we're not, again, we're not turning away, which is good for now. Okay, I've been asked to also share with you the services that we've actually brought to the shelter. And one that we're very, very proud of is medical services, free medical services, no-cost pharmaceutical, which is major, twice a week. I mean, it is beyond huge. I can't begin to tell you the lives that program has saved. Okay, of course, we have the Computer Workforce Development Center. We have the Library and Literacy Center, and we've opened up our Dress for Success boutique. And it is so nice, yes. It is very nice. You gotta see it. Gotta see it. It's very, very professional. And because we're bringing in more and more students, that Library Literacy Center has proven to be an excellent, excellent idea. In addition to that, there are 2 new programs that, as Brenda indicated, that we are partnering. One that she did not mention is the National Mental Health Department. The National Department of Mental Health. They have an internship program, the first time ever that it's ever been at a shelter, and we're going to start that on February the 15th with students that have already graduated with their bachelor's and they're working on their master's in sociology. Okay, and then last is Trade Tech. One thing that Brenda did not mention about LA Trade Tech's courses is that not only will they be providing them in the shelter, and we're in the process of assessing what classes will be identified with the clients, but they're also providing the clients in the shelter to take classes free of charge.
Thank you.
One sentence.
What?
Just, please, more funding is needed for New Image to
Really?
continue these services.
Yes.
Forward.
No,
Thank
really?
you.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rosendahl would like to make a comment.
Yeah, just a shout out to Jenma Fenn of my staff, who played a major role in opening up those centers and getting the funding and
Thank
stays
you.
focused on the homeless issues. Was there until 1:30 in the morning in Culver City when we got that vote
Well, perhaps
to
you
do
could
that.
reward her with a nice work furlough, Bill.
Oh, and we'll take away her car too.
And take away her BlackBerry, too.
That's
Yes,
right.
That's very good, yes. To reduce her efficiency. Thank you, though. Thank you for a good job.
She's great.
And thank you to Moran, Wilson, and Carrie and all that. Thank you. That marks the end of our agenda, both agendized items and public comment. Thank you very much for coming and staying today, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you in 30 days, roughly. Okay.